Mirror Trap. Part 1. The Flea Market Find. I should have known something was off about that mirror from the moment we saw it. My name is Alex, and this is how it all started. It was a lazy Saturday afternoon when my friends and I decided to check out the local flea market. The weather was perfect for wandering through stalls filled with everything from vintage clothing to bizarre knickknacks. The four of us, me, my girlfriend Emily, and our friends Jake and Lisa, were in high spirits, enjoying the treasure hunt. "Check this out," Jake called, waving us over to a stall near the back. The vendor, an old man with a wrinkled face and a sly grin, had a collection of oddities, but it was the mirror that caught our attention. It was huge, at least 6 feet tall, with an ornate wooden frame carved with intricate patterns. The glass was pristine, reflecting our faces with an unsettling clarity. Emily was immediately drawn to it. "It's beautiful," she said, her eyes wide with fascination. "How much?" The old man gave a toothy smile. "For you, young lady, I'll make it a special price. $100. "That's a steal," Lisa exclaimed. "It would look amazing in your living room, Alex." I wasn't so sure. There was something about the mirror that made me uneasy, but Emily's excitement was contagious. "What do you think?" she asked, turning those big, hopeful eyes on me. I sighed. "All right, let's get it." We managed to fit the mirror in the back of Jake's truck and brought it back to our apartment. It did look incredible in the living room, perfectly complementing the eclectic mix of furniture and decorations. We spent the rest of the evening admiring our find, joking around, and making plans for the next weekend. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching us. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination and eventually fell asleep. The real trouble started the next morning. I was the first to wake up. The apartment was quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the refrigerator. I headed to the kitchen to make coffee, but when I passed the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. The mirror was glowing. A soft, eerie light emanated from the glass, casting strange shadows on the walls. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was still half asleep, but the glow remained. Hesitantly, I stepped closer, drawn by a mix of curiosity and dread. As I approached, the light intensified, and I could see shapes moving within the glass. At first, I thought it was my reflection, but then I realized the figures were slightly different, distorted in subtle, unsettling ways. "Alex?" Emily's voice startled me, and I turned to see her standing in the doorway, looking concerned. "What's going on?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice shaky. "Look at the mirror." Emily walked over, her eyes widening as she saw the glow. "What is that?" Before I could answer, the light flared brightly, blinding us both. I shielded my eyes, and when I looked again, the glow was gone. The mirror was back to its normal reflective state. "That was weird," Emily said, shaking her head. "Maybe it's some kind of old lighting trick." "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't convinced. We tried to go about our day as usual, but the memory of the glowing mirror lingered. When Jake and Lisa arrived later, we told them what had happened. Jake laughed it off, but Lisa looked thoughtful. "Mirrors can be weird," she said. "I read somewhere that they can trap spirits or act as portals to other dimensions." "Great, so we bought a haunted mirror," Jake joked, but I could see the unease in his eyes. That night, the mirror glowed again. This time, all four of us saw it. The light was stronger, and the shapes in the glass were more distinct. I saw my own face staring back at me, but something was off. The eyes were too dark, the smile too cruel. "What the hell is going on?" Jake muttered, backing away. "We need to get rid of it," Emily said, her voice trembling. "This isn't normal." We agreed to move the mirror out of the apartment the next morning, but as we turned to leave, the glass began to ripple, like the surface of a disturbed pond. We froze, watching in horror as the ripples formed into faces. Our faces, but twisted and wrong. The reflections stepped out of the glass, solidifying into grotesque doppelgangers. They moved towards us, their eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. We bolted for the door, but the doppelgangers were fast, blocking our escape. Panic surged through me as I realized we were trapped. "Stay together!" Jake yelled, swinging a lamp at the nearest doppelganger. It shattered, but the creature barely flinched. We fought desperately, but it was clear we were outmatched. The doppelgangers were stronger, faster, and seemed to anticipate our every move. As one of them lunged at me, I tripped and fell, landing hard on the floor. "Alex!" Emily screamed, but she couldn't reach me in time. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was my own twisted face, grinning down at me with triumph. Part 2. Into the Abyss. When I regained consciousness, everything was different. The air felt heavy and cold, and a sense of dread settled in my chest. I slowly sat up, my head throbbing, and looked around. The room was a twisted version of our living room, dark, shadowy, and warped, like a nightmare brought to life. "Emily? Jake? Lisa?" I called out, my voice echoing in the eerie silence. There was no response. I stood up, my legs shaky, and tried to get my bearings. The mirror stood in the center of the room, its surface now dull and opaque. The doppelgangers were nowhere to be seen, but I knew they had dragged me somewhere. "Hello?" I called again, more urgently. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a faint, familiar voice. "Alex, is that you?" I turned to see Emily emerging from the shadows, looking as disoriented and terrified as I felt. Relief washed over me as I ran to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank God you're okay," I whispered. "Where are the others?" Emily shook her head. "I don't know. I woke up here, alone. This place, it's like a twisted version of our world." As we tried to piece together what had happened, a chilling realization dawned on us. "The mirror," I said. "It must have pulled us into this parallel world." "But why?" Emily asked, fear in her eyes. "Maybe those doppelgangers want to take our place in the real world," I replied, shuddering at the thought. We decided to find Jake and Lisa and figure out a way back. The oppressive atmosphere made it difficult to focus, but we couldn't afford to waste time. We carefully navigated through the twisted halls of our apartment, calling out for our friends. Eventually, we heard faint voices coming from one of the rooms. We rushed in to find Jake and Lisa, battered but alive, huddled together. They looked up, their faces lighting up with relief. "Alex! Emily!" Jake exclaimed, getting to his feet. "We thought we were the only ones here." "Same here," I said, helping Lisa up. "We need to stick together and find a way out." As we regrouped, we noticed that the mirror's surface had changed again. It was now clear, showing glimpses of the real world on the other side. Our doppelgangers were there, mimicking our actions, but with subtle, sinister differences. "We have to stop them," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "If they replace us, who knows what they'll do?" "But how?" Jake asked. "We don't even know how to get back." "We need to find a way to use the mirror," I said. "Maybe there's something in this world that can help us." We cautiously explored the apartment, which seemed to shift and change as we moved. Every corner held new, disturbing distortions, and we had to fight to keep our sanity. After what felt like hours, we found a room that seemed different. A library filled with ancient, dusty books. "Look at this," Emily said, picking up a book with a symbol that matched the carvings on the mirror's frame. "This might have answers." We pored over the book, which detailed the history of the mirror and its power to create portals between worlds. It spoke of rituals and incantations that could be used to control the mirror, but it was written in an archaic language we struggled to decipher. "Here," Jake said, pointing to a passage. "This part mentions a way to close the portal and trap the doppelgangers." We worked together to translate the text, piecing together the ritual. It required us to confront our doppelgangers and perform a series of steps to break the connection between the worlds. "We can do this," I said, trying to muster confidence. "We just need to stick together and follow the instructions." We returned to the living room, where the mirror now seemed to pulse with energy. Our doppelgangers were waiting, their expressions malevolent. As we began the ritual, the room grew darker, and the air thickened with tension. The doppelgangers attacked, trying to disrupt the ritual. We fought back, using everything we had learned. Emily recited the incantations, her voice steady despite the fear. Jake and Lisa held off the doppelgangers, giving us the time we needed. The mirror began to glow, its surface rippling like water. We could see the real world clearly now, a beacon of hope. With one final desperate push, we completed the ritual. A blinding light filled the room, and the doppelgangers screamed in agony as they were sucked back into the mirror. The glass cracked and shattered, and we were thrown back into the real world. When the light faded, we were back in our apartment, the mirror reduced to shards on the floor. We were exhausted, but relieved. We had survived. "Is it over?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think so," I replied, looking at the broken pieces of the mirror. "We did it." We embraced, thankful to be alive and back in the real world. The ordeal had brought us closer together, but we knew we would never forget the horrors we had faced. As we cleaned up the shattered glass, I couldn't shake the feeling that our battle with the doppelgangers was only the beginning. The mirror was gone, but the darkness it had brought into our lives would linger. For now, though, we were safe, and that was enough. Part 3. The Residue of Evil. Days passed, but the events with the mirror were far from behind us. Our lives had changed in ways we couldn't fully understand. Emily, Jake, Lisa, and I tried to return to normal, but the sense of unease never left. Emily and I spent most of our time together, trying to find solace in each other's presence. Jake and Lisa visited often, and we made a point to keep our doors locked and our windows shut, as if that could keep the darkness at bay. One evening, as we were gathered in the living room, Emily brought up something that had been on all our minds. "Do you guys feel like we're still being watched?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa nodded, looking haunted. "I can't shake the feeling. It's like something followed us back." Jake, usually the skeptic, agreed. "I've been having weird dreams. In them, I'm still in that twisted world, but it feels too real to be just a dream." I had been experiencing the same thing. Every night, I found myself back in that nightmarish version of our apartment, facing my doppelganger. It felt like the line between our world and the parallel one was blurring. "We need to figure out what's going on," I said, trying to sound confident. "There has to be something we missed." We decided to visit Dr. Gordon, a professor at the local university who specialized in paranormal phenomena. Jake had taken a class with him and mentioned that he might be able to help us understand what we were dealing with. Dr. Gordon's office was in a dimly lit corner of the university's old building. The room was filled with books and artifacts, giving it an air of mystery. He greeted us warmly, his keen eyes observing each of us carefully. "What brings you to my office?" he asked, settling into his chair. We told him everything, from buying the mirror to the horrific encounter with our doppelgangers. Dr. Gordon listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "This is fascinating," he said when we finished. "I've heard of similar cases, though they are rare. Mirrors have long been considered portals to other dimensions, and what you experienced is a form of that." "Can they still reach us?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Gordon looked thoughtful. "It's possible. Destroying the mirror closed the primary portal, but if the connection was strong enough, there could be residual effects. You need to find and eliminate any remaining links." "How do we do that?" I asked. "The dreams," he said. "They might be the key. If the link persists in your subconscious, it's likely there's still a tether between the worlds. You need to confront and sever it." That night we prepared for a collective attempt to confront our doppelgangers in our dreams. Dr. Gordon suggested a method of lucid dreaming, where we could be aware and in control of our actions while asleep. It wasn't easy, but desperation made us willing to try anything. We gathered in the living room, lying on makeshift beds, and followed Dr. Gordon's instructions to the letter. As sleep overcame us, I found myself back in the nightmare version of our apartment, but this time, I was aware. Emily, Jake, and Lisa were there too, their faces reflecting the same mix of fear and determination I felt. We moved together, searching for the source of the link. The doppelgangers appeared almost immediately, their sinister smiles sending chills down my spine. "This ends now," I said, trying to project confidence. The doppelgangers attacked, but this time we were ready. We fought back with a new sense of purpose, driven by the need to reclaim our lives. The battle was intense, the air crackling with energy. It felt like hours, but we finally managed to overpower them. As the last doppelganger fell, the room began to dissolve, the twisted reality crumbling around us. A blinding light enveloped us, and I felt a strange sensation, like a weight being lifted from my chest. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the living room. Emily, Jake, and Lisa were waking up too, looking as exhausted and relieved as I felt. "Did we do it?" Emily asked, her voice hopeful. "I think so," I said, feeling a sense of calm for the first time in weeks. "I think it's over." The following days confirmed our hopes. The dreams stopped, and the sense of being watched faded. We began to rebuild our lives, the bond between us stronger than ever. One afternoon, we decided to revisit the flea market, not to buy anything, but to find the old man who had sold us the mirror. We wanted answers, closure. But when we arrived, his stall was gone, and no one seemed to remember him. "It's like he never existed," Lisa said, shaking her head. "Maybe it's better this way," Jake replied. "Some mysteries are better left unsolved." As we walked away, I glanced back one last time, half expecting to see the old man watching us. But there was nothing. Just the bustling market and the distant sound of laughter. Life slowly returned to normal, though the memory of the mirror and its horrors would stay with us forever. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, our friendship stronger for it. But in the back of my mind, I knew we had been lucky. There were other mirrors, other worlds, and other dangers lurking just beyond the surface of our reality. For now, though, we were safe. Part 4. The Echoes of the Past. With the ordeal behind us, we tried to move forward. Emily, Jake, Lisa, and I resumed our routines, but the experience left a permanent mark. The memories lingered, like shadows at the edge of our vision. We often gathered to talk, to reassure ourselves that we were safe and that the nightmare was truly over. One evening, we decided to visit an old friend, Karen, who had moved out of town a few years ago. Karen had always been fascinated by the paranormal and had a vast collection of books and artifacts related to it. We hoped that talking to her might help us understand more about what we had gone through. Karen welcomed us warmly into her cozy home, filled with the scent of freshly baked cookies and the sound of soft classical music. We settled into her living room, and after catching up, we shared our story. Karen listened intently, her eyes widening with each detail. "That's incredible," she said when we finished. "I've read about mirrors being portals, but I've never heard of anyone experiencing it firsthand. You must have been terrified." "We were," Emily said, shuddering at the memory. "It was like being trapped in a nightmare." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "There might be more to this than just the mirror. Sometimes, events like these are connected to something deeper, something from the past." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, leaning forward. Karen stood up and went to her bookshelf, pulling out an old leather-bound book. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. "Here," she said, showing us an illustration of a mirror similar to the one we had. "This mirror is part of a set created centuries ago by a powerful sorcerer. They were designed to act as portals between worlds, but they were also cursed to trap the souls of those who used them." "That sounds like what we went through," I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. Karen nodded. "The sorcerer created the mirrors to gain power, but his plan backfired. He ended up trapped in one of the mirrors himself, and his followers hid the others to prevent anyone from suffering the same fate. But over the centuries, the mirrors resurfaced, often bringing tragedy to those who found them." "Do you think there are more of these mirrors out there?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "It's possible," Karen replied. "And if you destroyed one, the others might still be active. The connection between them could explain why you still feel uneasy." We thanked Karen for her help and left with a sense of urgency. If there were more mirrors out there, we needed to find them and put an end to their curse. But how? As we drove back, Emily turned to me. Alex, do you think Dr. Gordon might have more information? Maybe, I replied. He did say he knew of similar cases. It's worth a shot. We visited Dr. Gordon the next day, sharing what Karen had told us. He listened carefully, nodding in agreement. I've heard of these mirrors, he said. They're rare and dangerous. If there are more out there, finding them won't be easy. How do we even start? Jake asked, frustration evident in his voice. Dr. Gordon thought for a moment. There are places where these kinds of artifacts tend to show up. Antique shops, flea markets, estate sales. You might also find leads in old records or archives. It will take time and effort, but it's not impossible. We spent the next few weeks scouring antique shops and flea markets, asking discreet questions and searching for any clues. It was exhausting and often discouraging, but we were determined. One day, while digging through old records at the local library, we found a mention of a mirror matching the description of ours in a town a few hours away. We decided to take a weekend trip to investigate. The town, Willow Creek, had an eerie charm, with its old buildings and quiet streets. We checked into a small inn and began our search. At an antique store on the outskirts of town, we struck gold. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hargrove, had a mirror that matched the description perfectly. She told us she had inherited it from her grandmother, who had always warned her it was cursed. Why haven't you gotten rid of it? Emily asked, curious. Mrs. Hargrove sighed. I tried, but it always finds its way back to me. I've come to accept that it's my burden to bear. Can we see it? I asked, my heart pounding. She led us to a back room where the mirror stood, covered in a heavy cloth. When she pulled it away, we felt a familiar chill. The mirror looked almost identical to the one we had destroyed, with the same intricate carvings and ominous presence. We need to destroy it, Jake said, his voice firm. Mrs. Hargrove looked relieved. If you think you can, you're welcome to try. That night, we gathered in the inn, the mirror standing ominously in the center of the room. We prepared ourselves for whatever might happen, recalling the ritual Dr. Gordon had taught us. As we began, the mirror's surface started to ripple, and we saw our reflections twist into the familiar doppelgangers. But this time, we were ready. We chanted the incantations, our voices steady and strong. The doppelgangers fought back, but we stood our ground, determined to end the curse once and for all. The mirror glowed brighter and brighter until it shattered with a deafening crack. The doppelgangers dissolved into nothingness, and we were left standing in the quiet room, our hearts pounding. Is it over? Emily asked, looking around. I think so, I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. We returned to Mrs. Hargrove's shop the next day, showing her the shards of the mirror. She thanked us profusely, tears of gratitude in her eyes. We felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing we had done something good. As we drove back home, we felt lighter, the shadows of the past finally lifting. There might be other mirrors out there, but we knew we could face them together. Our bond had been tested and strengthened, and we were ready for whatever the future held. Part 5. Confronting the darkness. Our relief was short-lived. Destroying the second mirror brought us a sense of temporary peace, but it didn't last. Nightmares returned, this time more vivid and terrifying. I found myself back in that twisted world, the faces of my doppelganger and those of my friends haunting my every step. Emily, Jake, and Lisa experienced the same. We knew there were more mirrors out there, and until we destroyed them all, we would never truly be free. One night, as we sat in my living room, trying to comfort each other, Emily spoke up. We need to do more than just destroy these mirrors. We need to understand their origin and find a way to break the curse for good. Jake nodded in agreement. Dr. Gordon mentioned old records and archives. There must be something we missed, something that can help us. The next day we returned to Dr. Gordon's office. He was surprised to see us but listened intently as we explained our continued struggles. The sorcerer who created these mirrors left behind more than just cursed objects. There must be a way to undo his work, he mused. Dr. Gordon suggested we visit an old library in a nearby town. known for its extensive collection of rare and ancient texts. The library was located in an old mansion, its dusty shelves filled with forgotten knowledge. We spent days combing through the books, searching for anything that could help us. Finally, Lisa found an old, tattered journal written by one of the sorcerer's followers. It detailed the creation of the mirrors and the rituals used to control them. The mirrors were part of a larger spell, Lisa read aloud, her voice echoing in the quiet library. The sorcerer intended to create a network of portals to different worlds, drawing power from each one. But he was betrayed by his followers, who trapped him in one of the mirrors. To break the curse, one must find and destroy all the mirrors, then perform a final ritual to sever the connection between the worlds. "That's it," Emily said, her eyes wide with determination. "We need to find all the mirrors and perform this ritual." Armed with this new information, we set out on a quest to locate the remaining mirrors. It was a daunting task, but we were driven by the need to end this nightmare once and for all. Our journey took us to remote towns and forgotten places, each mirror presenting its own set of challenges. We encountered other victims, people who had been trapped or tormented by their doppelgangers. Each encounter strengthened our resolve and provided us with valuable allies. Finally, after months of searching, we found the last mirror in an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of a small village. The mansion was eerie, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in ivy. As we approached, a sense of foreboding washed over us, but we knew we couldn't turn back. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of dark hallways and decaying rooms. The mirror stood in the center of a grand ballroom, its surface reflecting a distorted version of our world. We gathered around it, our hearts pounding. "This is it," I said, my voice steady. "We end this now." We began the final ritual, our voices rising in unison. The mirror's surface rippled, and our doppelgangers emerged, their eyes filled with malevolent intent. But this time, we were ready. We fought with everything we had, our determination fueled by the knowledge that this was our last battle. As the ritual neared its climax, the room filled with a blinding light. The mirror cracked and shattered, the shards dissolving into nothingness. Our doppelgangers let out a final, agonized scream before vanishing into the void. The light faded, and we were left standing in the quiet ballroom, the air heavy with the scent of victory. The connection between the worlds had been severed, the curse broken. We returned home, exhausted but triumphant. The nightmares stopped, and the sense of being watched faded. Life slowly returned to normal, though we would never forget the ordeal we had endured. Dr. Gordon was overjoyed when we shared our success with him. "You've done something incredible," he said, beaming. "You've not only saved yourselves, but countless others who would have fallen victim to the mirrors." We knew he was right, but the experience had changed us. We had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger, our bond unbreakable. We decided to share our story, hoping to warn others and prevent future tragedies. Months later, we gathered in my living room, reminiscing about our journey. "Do you think there are other artifacts like those mirrors out there?" Jake asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "Probably," I replied. "But if there are, we'll be ready." Emily smiled, squeezing my hand. "Together, we can face anything." We had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious, our friendship stronger than ever. The mirrors were gone, but their memory would stay with us, a reminder of our strength and resilience. For now, we were free, and that was enough.